Welcome to BeFM Drama. I'm your host, Joshua Cornwell, and this week we're presenting our adaptation of The Priory School by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, a Sherlock Holmes mystery. In this episode, the great detective has agreed to help Dr. Huxtable, the principal of the Priory School in Yorkshire, to find a missing student, Lord Saltire, the 10-year-old heir of Duke Holdernesse, one of the most powerful noblemen in England. The boy has been missing for 3 days, along with Heidegger, a German teacher from the school. Holmes and Watson have accompanied Huxtable to Yorkshire and are preparing to begin their investigation. That evening found us in the cold, bracing atmosphere of the Peak Country, in which Dr. Huxtable's famous school was situated. It was already dark when we arrived. The butler whispered something to Huxtable, who turned to us with anxiety all over his face.
The Duke is here with his secretary, Mr. Wilder, in my office. Come, gentlemen, I will introduce you.
I was, of course, familiar with photographs of the famous Duke. He was a tall and stately person, perfectly dressed, with a thin face and a nose which was curved and long. His complexion was deathly pale, which created a startling contrast with his long beard of vivid red hair. Such was the man who looked stonily at us from the center of Dr. Huxtable's office, where he sat. Beside him stood a very young man I understood to be Wilder, the Duke's private secretary. He was small, nervous, and alert, with intelligent, light blue eyes and lively features. It was he who opened the conversation.
I called this morning, Dr. Huxtable, but I was too late to prevent you from leaving for London. I've learned you invited Mr. Sherlock Holmes to undertake an investigation of the case. The Duke is surprised, Dr. Huxtable, that you would take such a step without consulting him.
When I learned that the police had failed...
His Grace is by no means convinced that the police have failed.
But surely, Mr. Wilder...
You are well aware, Dr. Huxtable, that the Duke is anxious to avoid all public scandal. He would greatly prefer to limit the number of people with knowledge of his situation.
Dr. Huxtable looked deathly ashamed and embarrassed.
I'm sure this mistake can be easily cleared up. Mr. Sherlock Holmes can return to London by the morning train.
Hardly that, Doctor, hardly. This northern air is so invigorating and pleasant. I'd like to spend a few days wandering the moor, occupying my mind as best I can. Whether I have the shelter of your school's roof or that of the village inn during my stay is, of course, for you to decide.
I could see that the unfortunate doctor was being torn by indecision, but he was rescued by the deep voice of the red-bearded Duke, which boomed out like a dinner gong.
Dr. Huxtable, you would have been wise to consult me before leaving for London. But since Mr. Holmes is already here and knows the details, it would be absurd to send him away. Far from going to the inn, Mr. Holmes, I would be pleased if you would stay with me at Holdernesse Hall.
Thank you, Your Grace, but for the purposes of my investigation, I would prefer to stay at the location of the mystery.
As you like, Mr. Holmes. Any information Mr. Wilder or I can give you is, of course, at your disposal.
It will probably be necessary for me to visit you at the hall later. For now, I only ask if you have any possible explanations in mind about the mysterious disappearance of your son.
I have not.
Excuse me for alluding to a painful subject, Your Grace, but I have no alternative. Do you think that the Duchess had anything to do with this business?
The great Duke hesitated for a moment.
I do not think so.
The rather obvious explanation is that your son has been kidnapped for the purpose of demanding a ransom. Have you had any such demand?
No, sir.
One more question, Your Grace. I understand that you wrote to your son on the day when this disappearance occurred.
No, I wrote him the day before.
But he received it on that day.
Yes.
Was there anything in your letter which might have unbalanced him or induced him to run away?
No, sir, certainly not.
Did you post that letter yourself?
The nobleman's reply was interrupted by his secretary Wilder, who broke in with some anger.
His Grace is not in the habit of mailing letters himself. This letter was laid with others on the study table, and I put them in the post.
You are sure this one was among them?
Yes.
How many letters did your Grace write that day?
20 or 30. I have a large number of correspondence, but surely this is irrelevant.
Not entirely.
For my own part, I advise the police to turn their attention to the south of France. I do not believe the Duchess would encourage so monstrous an action, but the lad has had the most wrong-headed ideas, and it is possible that he may have run to her, helped by this German. I think, Dr. Huxtable, that we will now return to the hall.
I could see Holmes wanted to ask more questions, but the nobleman's abrupt manner showed us the interview was at an end. It was clear that discussion of his intimate family affairs with strangers was deeply uncomfortable, and that the feeling became worse with every fresh question. Once the nobleman and his secretary had left, my friend flung himself into the investigation. The boy's room revealed nothing, except that it was impossible for him to have left undetected by any other route than the window. Heidegger's room also gave no further clue. In his case, the ivy had broken under his weight, and we saw the mark on the lawn where his heels had come down. That one dint in the short grass was the only solid evidence of the bizarre nighttime escape. Sherlock Holmes left the school alone and returned late that night. He had found a large map of the neighborhood and brought it into my room, where he stared at it silently for some time.
This case grows on me, Watson. Look at this map. Here is the Priory School. You see the main road runs east to west past the school, and you also see that there is no side road for a mile in either direction. If these two went by road, then it was this road.
Exactly.
I spoke to the constable on duty that night on the eastern crossroad. He is positive that no one passed his way. That blocks the east side. There is an inn at the western crossroads. The landlady was sick that night, and her guests watched the road until dawn, waiting for the doctor. No German or schoolboy were seen. From this evidence, we can say the fugitives did not use the road.
But the bicycle?
Give me a moment. If these people did not travel by road, they must have crossed the countryside to the north or south of the school. That is certain. The way south is covered with small fields separated by stone walls. A bicycle would be useless. North, then. The land to the north is wooded for a ways and then breaks into an open moor. Look here. Holdernesse Hall on the edge of the moor. 10 miles by road from the school, but only 6 if you go directly across to Wilderness. Surely they must have gone north in the direction of the boy's home.
But what about the bicycle?
Watson, a good cyclist does not need a paved road. The moor is crisscrossed with walking paths, and the moon was full. Hello, what's this?
There was an agitated knock on the door, and an instant later Dr. Huxtable was in the room, holding a blue school hat in his hands.
At last, we have a clue. Thank heavens. At last we are on the dear boy's trail. It is his cap.
Where was it found?
With a group of tramps who camped out on the moor. They left on Tuesday. Today the police tracked them down and examined their possessions. This was found.
How did the vagrants account for it?
They said that they found it on the moor on Tuesday morning. They know where he is, the rascals. Thank goodness, they're all safe under lock and key. Either fear of the law or the Duke's money will certainly persuade them to talk.
The doctor left the room in a state of glee.
So far, so good. It at least gives us some evidence that the boy passed through the moor. The police really have done nothing locally except arrest these tramps. Look here on the map, Watson. There is a stream across the moor. In some areas it widens into a morass, especially in the area between Holdernesse Hall and the school. It will be foolish to look elsewhere for tracks in this dry weather, but at that point there is a chance of some record being left in the mud. I will wake you early tomorrow morning and we'll see if we can throw a little light on the mystery.
The day was just breaking when I woke to find the long, thin form of Holmes standing by my bedside. He was fully dressed and had apparently already been outside.
I've examined the lawn and the bicycle shed. I've also had a wander through the woods just south of the moor. Now, Watson, I must beg you hurry, for we have a very busy day ahead of us.
His eyes shone, and his cheeks were flushed with the exhilaration of the master workman who sees his work lie ready before him. I knew as I looked upon him that a strenuous day indeed awaited us. With that, we've come to the end of Part 2 in our adaptation of the Priory School here on BeFM Drama. Join us again here tomorrow evening for Part 3 in our program, as the investigation of Sherlock Holmes into the mysterious disappearance of the young Lord Saltire and the German teacher Heidegger from the prestigious Priory School in northern England takes the great detective and his companion Dr. Watson deep into the open moors of Yorkshire here on BeFM Drama.